I used to say I wanted a man who could keep up with me, which is funny because I spent most of my 20s out of breath chasing chaos and calling it a personality. Then I met Ethan, who did everything right without making a show of it. Car inspections before road trips, sunscreen in the glove box, a paper map tucked under the seat because phones die. He was steady in a way I mistook for small, like a harbor you complain about until you try sailing in a storm. We dated 3 years and married in a little ceremony by the lake where he grew up, the kind of day that makes you think kindness is a long-term investment with compounding interest. The rot started slow. I got promoted at the agency, started traveling for brand shoots with people who made spontaneity look sexy. There was Nico, a photographer who lived out of a backpack and said beds were for cowards. There was Tessa, who booked last-minute flights to wherever a cheap fare popped up. They told stories in airports about cliff jumps and scooter crashes and waking up in cities they couldn't pronounce, and I laughed and leaned in because the way they told it, safety sounded like stagnation. At home, Ethan meal prepped on Sundays, folded my laundry in thirds the way he knows I like, and asked about my day with his hands still greasy from fixing our wobbly table. Somewhere in that gap, I decided his predictability was a flaw I might be brave enough to fix. For his birthday, he planned a cabin weekend with a slow cooker stew and a stack of books. I suggested an upgrade, sunrise hike to the ridge everyone on Instagram was photographing, the one with the skinny outcropping where couples posted their dangling feet and captions about trusting the universe. He said we should try a shorter trail first. I called him cautious like it was an insult, and because he is not a man who makes love a competition, he agreed. We left at 4 with headlamps and coffee and the kind of fog that soaks through clothes. 20 minutes in, I saw 2 girls in sports bras take a narrow cut to the viewpoint. I veered after them and Ethan said, "Babe, that's not the route," and I rolled my eyes and kept going because strangers on the internet had made the detour look easy. 5 minutes later the path pinched to a slick shelf above a drop that made my teeth feel loose. I froze. Ethan didn't gloat. He came up behind me, put one hand on the back of my jacket and the other on the rock, and walked me backward, step by careful step, to solid ground. He never said "I told you so." He also didn't take the selfie I reached for when my legs stopped shaking. That should have been the moment I recalibrated. Instead, I posted a boomerang of our boots at the trailhead and captioned it "Baby steps for the cautious husband," with a winky face I thought would read as affectionate. My friends laughed. Ethan didn't say a word. A week later, Nico invited me to a bouldering gym. He filmed me falling on the crash pad and I laughed too loud, then posted clips of my first send set to some reckless song. Ethan watched them while stirring sauce and said, "Looks fun," like he meant it, and I snapped back, "You'd hate it, because cruelty sometimes arrives dressed as swagger." The comment I can't take back happened at his sister's house over pot roast and a slideshow of family pictures no one had asked for. The projector froze on a photo of Ethan at 12 wearing a life jacket 3 sizes too big while the other kids swam without any, and his uncle laughed and said, "Always careful, eh?" It was meant kindly, a family rib. I took the opening like a dare. "Oh, totally," I said, spearing a carrot. He's the guy who reads the manual before plugging in a toaster. My ex would have been halfway down a cliff before Ethan finished packing a first aid kit. The room hiccuped. Someone clinked a fork against a plate to fill the silence. His mother's smile flattened. Ethan raised his glass and said, "To manuals," and everyone laughed again because families rescue dinners for sport. In the car, I waited for him to bring it up. He didn't. I said, "You know I was kidding," and he said, "I know you were honest, the way someone reads a weather report." He went to bed early. I sat in the kitchen refreshing a post that wasn't worth it. After that, he changed in ways so subtle I almost missed them. He stopped narrating his schedule. He started sleeping with his phone on mute and in a different room because he'd read a thing about sleep hygiene, but I took it personally. He kept making my coffee, but he set it by my laptop instead of my hand. He was still careful. Just not with my feelings, not in the old way where he patted every corner like we were toddlers learning to walk. Meanwhile, I kept applying for chaos like it was a job. When Tessa pitched a girls' content trip to Tulum, I said yes before checking our shared calendar. The night before I left, Ethan set up my travel router because the hotel Wi-Fi reviews were bad. I kissed his cheek and posted a mirror selfie in the airport bathroom with the caption "Gone Girl," which would be funny if it weren't foreshadowing. On the second night, we ended up at a bar where the entire menu was mezcal and betrayal. Nico lifted me onto the edge of a planter to get good light for a dance story, and some guy named Mateo who sold jewelry on the beach spun me in circles I pretended were freedom. I filmed a shot of 2 glasses clinking and captioned it "Adventure Routine" with no tags and no mention of my husband, and sent it live because the dopamine of strangers is cheaper than therapy. Ethan replied to my landed text with "Love you, be safe," and when I posted the clink he didn't say a word. His silence made me reckless. When I got home, the house was cleaner than I'd left it, and a stack of my folded mail sat at a perfect right angle on the counter. He had replaced a flickering kitchen light, the world's dullest bulb shone like a judgment. I said, "Missed you," and he kissed my forehead like I was a visiting cousin. That week, he asked if we could talk Saturday after breakfast. He made French toast, the kind he eats in corners so syrup doesn't drip on the newspaper, and then he took out a folder. My stomach did the thing it does when turbulence drops the plane. He slid over a printout of his company's sabbatical policy. 12 weeks paid after 5 years, which he'd hit last month. He had a list below it, handwritten: Peru, Nepal, Thailand, New Zealand. "I wanted to ask if you'd come for the first 2, he said. "I've been saving. I can cover our rent while we're gone." "I know you have the Q4 push, but I thought maybe," he stopped. We both knew what I'd thought maybe about. I had said after the rebrand last year, after the promotion in spring, after Tulum last week. I studied the list and searched for the part where this was about him and me instead of about me versus a version of me I posted online. 12 weeks? I said finally, like the number was an insult. "That's a lot of hiking and hostels for someone who reads manuals." It wasn't joke voice. It was unsheathed. He flinched so slightly I could have pretended I didn't see. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Thanks for being clear." He didn't bring it up again. 2 days later, an email pinged while I was on a call, a calendar invite titled "Sabbatical," blocked in gray across 3 months of my husband's life. I stared at it like it was a threat. That night he came home with a small duffel and said he'd be staying at his friend Jonah's for a bit to give us both space to think without performing. He took the travel router. He left the manual. I told myself it was a dramatic phase. I told myself he'd tire of packing cubes and bus schedules and come home with stories that sounded like apologies. I told myself a lot of things strangers would like. Weeks slid. My boss offered me a lead on a campaign that would define the brand voice, and I took it and stayed late under the fluorescent hum of ambition while my marriage went quiet like a room you forgot you left. The morning his sabbatical started, he texted me a photo of boots and a boarding pass and nothing else. I wrote "have fun," and threw my phone on the couch like it had burned me. His first posts were not flexes. They looked like the world looking back, a bridge in Lima with the light like honey on stone, a bowl of soup he said tasted like the inside of a firecracker, a mountain seen from below because starting places matter. He didn't post a selfie until week 3, and in it he looked bigger, somehow, but lighter, like something he'd been carrying for both of us had fallen off. My friend sent me screenshots like evidence. "He's glowing," Tessa wrote, and it was both harmless and a wound. By the time he hit Nepal, He'd learned to say thank you in the right way and to tie his laces with a double knot that never, ever failed. He hiked to a base camp I'd only ever seen in documentaries, and in the caption he wrote about a Sherpa who told him the bravest thing isn't summiting, it's turning back when the mountain says no. I read it on my couch with a ring light in my periphery and realized I had never turned back from anything, I just jumped and hoped for Wi-Fi. I tried to call him then because epiphanies feel like emergencies when you're alone. He texted back hours later from a different day, no service, all good, and a photo of a sky so close it made me dizzy. In Thailand, he got certified to dive. The video he posted showed him disappearing into water like a secret and re-emerging grinning with his regulator still in like a kid who refuses to take cake out of his mouth to show you he likes it. A woman cheered behind the camera. I watched that clip 10 times trying to decide if the laugh was mine by memory or someone else's in real time. In New Zealand, he stood on a hillside under a wool blanket sky with a woman named May who tagged him in a photo of 2 steaming mugs and wrote, "He knows how to read a map and make a plan and also when to throw both away." I clicked her profile like I was checking an injury for blood. She was a structural engineer on a months-long project to retrofit quake-damaged buildings. She wore boots like she meant it. Her captions were either math or poetry and sometimes both. When he posted a photo of the two of them in rain gear, faces flushed, I sat on my kitchen floor and, for the first time since I'd learned how, did not take a picture of myself doing it. He came back for 48 hours before heading to the next leg to swap a bag and sign what needed signing. He asked if we could meet at the coffee shop with the plant wall, the one where he'd told me he wanted to marry me because the espresso machine sounded like a train and he wanted us to go places together even if it was only the grocery store. He was early. He always is. He looked like someone I knew and someone I had not met, which I guess is what growth looks like when you weren't invited. He said hello like he meant it. He asked about my campaign and actually listened. I told him the part where the client chose the safe concept and we pretended it was a win, and he nodded with a kindness that did not read as pity. Then he slid a folder across the table. I knew what it was before I opened it. The lawyer had put it in calm language: separation, equitable division, no blame on record because blame is not a legal currency. I thought we might as well sign while I'm in town, he said softly. No pressure if you want more time. I looked for anger in his face and found mercy instead, which somehow felt more final. Is there someone else? I asked because I am not brave enough to stop myself from being small. There is me, he said. And there might be. But this is not about replacing a person. It's about refusing to replace the life I wanted with a performance of yours. I signed because dragging it out only feeds a story that already ate too much. He signed because he keeps his appointments. We cried in that quiet way grown people do when they still love something they cannot keep. At the door he kissed my forehead. The cousin kiss, the mercy kiss. And said, "Thank you for being honest, finally." He left. The bell chimed twice. The plant wall breathed like something that doesn't care if you look at it. Months later, I watched him on a friend's story at an airport I couldn't name, arm around May, both of them in those ugly neck pillows that only joyful people wear with confidence. Someone in the background said congratulations, and May lifted her left hand and I saw the ring. Simple, a circle like a promise kept to yourself first. They weren't showing off, they were documenting logistics. I scrolled back to the morning I'd written baby steps for the cautious husband and wanted to crawl out of my skin and hand him my apology written on every manual I never read. My life now is fine in the way apartments are fine when you are kind to them. I make coffee and do not take a picture of the steam. I walk to the river without headphones sometimes and try not to narrate to an audience that isn't there. I go to the climbing gym alone and pay attention to the part where your heart beats just enough to remind you you're alive. I leave when my forearms shake instead of forcing a story. People still tell me adventure is a plane ticket. I have learned it can be a boundary. It turns out he wasn't unadventurous, he was unwilling to gamble the person he loved on my need to look brave. He wanted to build a life where the risk was in the view, not in whether the person next to him respected him in public. He has that now, somewhere under a sky I cannot see, reading a map with a woman who knows when to fold it. I said he wasn't adventurous enough and used that as permission to behave like I was. He took a deep breath, made a plan, and left. Now he is traveling the world without me, which sounds like a punishment until you realize it is simply the consequence of him choosing an adventure worth having, one where the person beside you is not busy staging a cliff.